Okay, as you can see, it's a pretty normal Aileron hinging process. I'm going to give you a couple things here. Everybody probably knows this or whatever, but I tend to like to mark the center of where the ailerons are going to go on the bottom side so nobody sees it anyway. And that way I know where I'm going to be inserting them when I put the aileron CA hinges back in. The other thing that, so I do that after I test fit them and get them in the right spot. The other thing they don't talk about in this particular instruction manual, but is very common, is to take probably like a 1/16 inch drill, the smallest drill head you have, on a pin vise if you have one. I just use my fingers, and just drill a hole in into the wing to it creates a channel so that the CA wicks inside, right? And that way you do that on both sides of your hinges. Get right to the back of the hinges and gives you a good solid seal. And you just take a T-pin, insert it into the middle of the hinge, insert the hinge right back where it goes. Another T-pin. Okay, all the hinges are got a T-pin through them now. They're dry, of course, right now. Snug it in so the T-pin's tight to the aileron. And just, I'll try and get you to see this, but you kind of work it. I work it from one end to another. Usually start on the inside, get one started, get the next started, get the final one started. Push them tight so the T-pins are, of course, right handy in. Tight as you can. Make sure your ailerons spaced. There we go. It's kind of middle of the gap. Same amount of gap on both sides. Tight as I can between the T-pins. Now you can remove the T-pins. Got your CA handy. Ready to bath this. Now you just hold it up. Get the gap open. Lots of CA down the whole side. Flip it over. Try not to get any CA off of on anything but the hinge. And give it a moment to set. Do not use kicker. It says quite clearly in the manual not to use kicker, but don't use kicker. Give it a minute or two to set up. Okay, now this should be set up good. Just bust it a little bit, make sure it goes full. Doesn't want to release. Doesn't want to release. Okay, that's done. So this hinge is now finished. The ailerons are what we're doing, which is step 1 in the manual. Do the same thing on the other. Okay, now we're just going to carefully take the aileron covers up and expose the aileron servo bay. These are the covers that will cover up, or will hold your servo actually. Your servo will actually go on the underside of this. And you use a very sharp number 11 X-Acto knife. I'm going to actually switch to a much sharper one. Brand new blade. It's always good to work with a brand new blade as you're doing this. And I basically just insert it along the edge of the wood. Scrape it right to the end, tight to the edge. And I just cut the servo out, or the little bit of covering off that's in there. Clean up the edges a little bit. And you have a nice servo cover. Sit right like that. Just wanted to show you one thing here. Inside here is a piece of masking tape with some of the little bit of a line. Mine was loose and almost falling off. Make sure you snug that down for now. You don't want this little piece of rope to flow through, because that's what you're going to use to pull your servo cord or your servo wires through the wing and out the other side here. Okay, so I'm just taking my high-tech servo. I'm going to install the grommets, that's the dampeners. You don't forget to do this, although I'm sure most people working on this plane have done this kind of stuff before. There's one end that's flush and one end that's just curved all the way through. I'm sure you can see this is curved end. This is the side that's got the flush end. The flush end goes outside, and there's flush up there. I'm going to remove this round controller or control arm, the round one. I like to use this on these high-techs, this long arm that's adjustable, so you can put it however long you want it, and I'll just install it. Basically, servo is going to sit here like this, so you're going to want the servo arm going down through the hole. Make sure you put the serrated parts together so it comes down. There you go, like that. I'm going to just install the holder. Mechanically center your servo right now just by hand for measuring purposes. Later on, what you'll do is once this is all set up and the epoxy's dried and everything, you're going to want to connect this to your receiver, power up your receiver with all your trim set to neutral, and then center the servo will be centered, then adjust by taking this off and putting it back on the arm so it's as close to true center as you can get. Of course, we're going to be gluing with 5-minute epoxy. I've got some 5-minute mercury epoxy here. I'm going to glue this on in the right areas. Right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to center the servo arm in the slot left to right, or up and down and left to right, so that you've got full throw. Take my handy dandy marker, put a mark on here for where I want my blocks to sit. And of course, now it's time to take the remember, there's a little bit of space there, so right there is fine. Now I'm going to mix up some epoxy, put her in, and call her a day. I'll spark you up here in a second. Okay, before I begin, I've just taken the 2-part epoxy, put a little bit of resin in the bottom, and put an equal part of resin and hardener, of course. I know everybody knows how to do this, but I figure, what the heck, if I'm doing this, I'll do it for a complete newbie. I sometimes tend to put a little bit more hardener in there than resin. It's just me being, I don't know, silly. I've had 1 or 2 ones in my early days of using 2-part epoxy where I didn't have enough hardener in it, and it took forever to dry, and it didn't dry that hard. It was sort of sticky as opposed to firm, and that's not good. So you mix it so it's consistent, and it goes away from a clear color to a kind of translucent, kind of opaque-ish, uniform white to it. So now I put a little bit of epoxy on the servo block, the mounting blocks, and on the actual cover. Insert the cover right back where it was. Squeeze her down. That should be good. And we got back and front. Similar idea. Tons. Like I say, I've got tons more epoxy than I need. See, I'm going to use some of this excess epoxy on the outside of this. Now I don't mind being a little bit tight. You can always sand. It's not a big deal as long as your angles are true and your tops. So one thing I do suggest you have, got some methyl hydrate, and you're going to get epoxy on your fingers, and you might get it on something you don't want it on. Methyl hydrate removes epoxy really well. That way you don't leave sticky little epoxy fingerprints all over the covering of your aircraft. Not good. Just for fun, I want to show you something here, folks. I don't know if you got one of these little magnetic dishes for working in your garage, but I don't like having all my parts go missing. The bag's a good holder. If you got too big a hole, though, it can be a pain because everything falls out, and you got to have another place to keep it. So what I've done is I've just cut a little sliver, and then as I pop them out, I just pop them out over top of here. You can hear them, they fall in there, and they go nowhere. There you go. Now, I don't know if you can see it or not. I'm just going to twist around. There's just a gappiest, tiniest little hair gap of daylight in there. The idea, of course, is, and I should have showed you that on the last one, what you want to do is you don't want to quite have the servo touching when you drill these holes, because then you can avoid having vibrations. So what I've done is I've pre-drilled with a 1/16 inch drill bit. Now the 1/16 inch drill bit is a little smaller than what they call for in the manual, because in the manual they're calling for what you would use if you were using the regular JR servos. I'm not. What I'm using, of course, are the high-tech servos, and I find those to be a little bit thinner than the JR ones. Now, because the 1/16 is barely just a hair thinner than these, I'm not going to pre-thread these. I'm just going to take and drop a couple drops of CA down inside of each of these holes on the surface so I can tell when it's dry. And then now I'm going to reinstall the servo to the right depth. Line up the holes. Make sure I have just a little gap of light. Yeah, there we go. And what I want to do is I'll take my screwdriver, start all four. There's one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring one down, and I'm going to just tighten it so that the rubber starts to compress. There you go. That's tight now. I'll do the same for all four. As you can see, I marked this servo cover a little bit here. This is for the right wing or the starboard wing, front or leading edge and back or trailing edge. And that's just so I know if I leave them apart while I'm working on it, that this one 90 degrees to this leading edge. This is exactly where it needs to be. And I've done the same on the other side. As I stated earlier, one option would be to use something like electrical tape and form it around this. I'm probably going to put some tape on it just to give it a kind of a streamlined effect. But what I like to do underneath that is I just put a commercial servo holder here on it. Basically the connector holder. These you just snap them in here, and it's making me look like it's hard, but it's really not. And what that does is it keeps the connector from ever allowing coming apart while it's in the middle of the so what I tend to like to do is on the end that's going forward, I'll wrap a piece here, and it's just kind of bullets. I do the same thing on both sides, even though obviously you're not going to be pulling it through two directions as you're installing it. But heaven forbid, or for some reason you have to change the servo, or you want to swap it out and put it in a different model, you're done flying this one a year from now, whatever the case may be. Taking it out without wrecking the wing can be a devil if you haven't done it, bullet it this way as well. So now just like I say, it rolls up and around.